of Seija Lukula from Finland. She is a textile designer, and around the turn of the century, she was really troubled with the local waste, with the textile waste, and all the fast fashion, as she said in the interview. And as part of her legacy, she wanted to do something about it. And then it took her some time, and she hit the wall many times, but she turned and she framed the problem of local waste, of textile waste, into an entrepreneurial opportunity. So nowadays, what she does is upcycling and making new stuff out of old stuff. So she is in the business of recycled, upscaled clothes, and doing a good job as well. She has established a company called Clo, who even goes Europe nowadays. So in this case, we have an ecological problem turned into an entrepreneurial opportunity later on, and combined with social criteria later on in the process. Next slide, please.
I will take over from here. Another very interesting finding relates to the integration of users in developing sustainable solutions. So basically, this is very much in line with the focus of Work Package 3, which looks at how big companies integrate users in their innovation processes. And it was interesting for us to see that also the entrepreneurs in our sample approached this entrepreneurial process very openly. So what they were doing was trying to integrate other external users at all stages of the entrepreneurial process. And we picked out some examples from our study. And the example that you see, they also refer to the phenomenon of community entrepreneurship, where they try to build a community as part of the entrepreneurial process. And it could be at very different stages. So for example, the People Supermarket, they try to integrate external users, in other words, volunteers, very early in their entrepreneurial process, to build this network of people who really run this supermarket and build a relationship with them. Another example would be the Kartoffelkombinat, which is a community supporting agriculture based here in Munich. What they're doing is they focus very much on integrating users at the later stages of their process. So what they're doing is that they integrate these users in the decision making. All decisions are basically made in larger groups. Everybody can come together and make decisions, and people are actively involved in the day-to-day management of the Kartoffelkombinat. So we just found very interesting that also the entrepreneurs in our sample were very much focusing on integrating these active users in their development of a sustainable solution. Next slide, please. One of the major issues, not only when we're talking about sustainable entrepreneurship, but also when we're talking about entrepreneurship in general, is basically getting access to funding and choosing a legal form. While the legal form for traditional business is quite easy, usually we find limited liability companies, it has been interesting to see that the sustainable entrepreneurs in our samples were trying to find legal forms that reflect their hybrid nature of their businesses. So for example, what we found were combinations of established legal forms, such as the limited liability company in combination with an association. Polarstern is an example of that. They're a limited liability company, but they have also the Polarstern Association. So a combination to basically follow up on their goals and reflect their multiple goals. Then we have this newer forms, they are also very popular in the US, the B corporations. In Germany, we have the charitable limited liability company. Again, all legal forms trying to reflect this hybrid nature of the businesses. Also very interesting, this nature of cooperatives. I briefly mentioned it before. We found several cases where it was not an individual user or a team of users trying to pursue a sustainable businesses, but rather a group of users, communities, and often this community entrepreneurship took the form of a cooperative to really reflect that all this decision making is made collectively and in a group of people, and that there is not one person, like in a limited liability company, or two persons that make the decisions. So we think that this is a very promising avenue for further research, but also for the EU to pick up this line of different legal forms that better reflect how these companies try to integrate multiple goals. And similarly, as I mentioned before, there are new funding possibilities. And as funding has always been an issue, it's even much more so for sustainable businesses. The reason for that is quite simple, because sustainable businesses not only focus on economic profitability, but aiming to achieve also social welfare goals and aiming to advance their basically contribution to the natural environment. For them, it's very important to find access to financial sources different than investors. And in our research, we found that there are basically new funding possibilities coming up that are very relevant for such sustainable entrepreneurs, including crowdfunding, which is a phenomenon that is spreading not only in Europe but also in the US, or crowd investing, where people can actually invest in such businesses. And interestingly, there are many of these crowdfunding or crowd investing platforms that particularly focus on sustainable businesses, such as BetterVest, which is a German crowd investing platform. Next slide. One of the questions that we were frequently facing was this question whether sustainable entrepreneurs can actually have an impact when we look at the larger issues that we are facing nowadays. And what we found is that sustainable entrepreneurs have both. They have direct effects that can be rather easily measured, and they might not be as large, but they also have indirect effects, which are much more difficult to measure, but might still play a role when we look at this project call as well in the transition towards more sustainable lifestyle. So the direct effects are basically the effects the business has on their direct environment, whether this might be their customers, it might be their region, it might be their direct suppliers. And these are effects they can directly measure by means of social reporting standards. We have the Gemeinwohl economy, which is basically the economy for the common good, which is a new form of measuring these direct effects of sustainable businesses. But then again, I've mentioned the indirect effects, and here we are talking about these effects that entrepreneurs have on an industry, for example, by pushing an industry towards adopting more sustainable practices. An example for that would be Polarstern, who see their effects not only directly on, let's say, the Munich population or the Munich people who adopt their eco-gas and eco-electricity, but they also see that they're pushing the industry, the energy industry, towards adopting more of these eco-standards, and thereby having an indirect effect on this transition towards more sustainable lifestyles. Next and last slide from our side is the reference to our key publication, which is about the process, and also to our website and the blog. Particularly, the blog is currently being updated on a very regular basis, and you will find many of the topics that we covered today on this blog in the upcoming days and weeks. Now we are happy to take any of your questions or comments.
Okay, Frank, Julia, thank you very much for that overview of the great work you've been doing in Work Package 4. Now, for everyone who's on the call today, you can do a couple of things. The first is that you have a button with a hand on it, which you can use to actually speak directly, ask a question to Frank and Julia. Or alternatively, if you're a little shy, you can also click on the chat function and send a written question, which we will pick up and relay directly. But let's go for the more interactive option first. Do we have anybody who wants to ask something about the presentation that Frank and Julia have just made? see if any hands pop up. Not yet. Okay, so I will I will move the conversation along a little bit while people think about what they may want to ask. Frank, Julia, last week we had the webinar with our colleagues from Work Package 1, John Ferguson at Argus and Andre Harbish in Eichstätt. And one of the things that they were talking about in their webinar was how difficult it is to identify, first of all, excellent cases of these new user-driven enterprises, community enterprises, that actually meet all the triple bottom line criteria. In part because people don't seem to necessarily identify themselves as sustainability entrepreneurs. Is this something that you also found in the collection of case studies and the analysis of the 200 plus companies that you've gathered in Work Package 4?
I would say there are different types, but for the large majority, the founders or the co-founders would identify with the triple bottom line of economic, ecological, and social goals, and they purposely integrate ecological and social issues into their new venture. So I would say for the large majority of our companies, they are driven by a purpose, and many of them also want to make a difference, make a change. That's their explicit goal. However, having said that, in our sample, we could also identify some new sustainable ventures which are mainly there for the money. They are driven by profit, and they rather opportunistically integrate social and ecological issues. But I would say, at least from our point of view, it's not a representative sample, but from our point of view, it's the minority. And with regards to the users, I would say in some parts there is a very strong link, and in other parts there is a weak link. What do I mean? For example, one company from the Czech Republic we haven't mentioned yet is Raw Food, founded by Teresa, and she was a user. She innovated for herself in the area of raw food, and later on, with her experience and capabilities, she set up a company. So this is a classic example of user entrepreneurship as presented in the literature. In other cases, like Polarstern, for example, a company located in Munich, there's a weaker link, which means that the three founders had an interest in the energy market, but they were just everyday users who started to innovate in that area as well. So that's a rather weak link. Any other questions you might have?
Let's see. So we've opened everybody's microphones, given it's nice and quiet here at the moment, so there shouldn't be too much of an echo or feedback. So anybody should just feel free to speak if they have an immediate question or something they would like to add.
Yeah, we have a quick question. Do you have any data regarding the age of these entrepreneurs?
Yes, in general we do. Again, it's not a representative sample, but most of them are in the age group of, let's say, 30 to 40. They were raised in the 1980s, 1990s, when, you know, the first ecological crisis came up against the background of Chernobyl and other critical incidents. They were raised and came up with ecological and social values in school, in their family, and they were sensitized to these topics. And then they pursued their career or their studies, and later on, after their studies, or after some time in a, let's say, conventional career, it might be consulting, it might be work in a multinational company, sooner or later, they started realizing that they want to do something else. They want to do something with an impact, with a meaning. And that's why they changed course, and many of them built up a new sustainable venture.
Yes. Okay. Sorry, any data about the gender?
Similarly, it's not representative. We have more men than women, which is a phenomenon that we have in entrepreneurship in general. Although I would say that we do have our female entrepreneurs as well, but they're the minority.
However, my hunch would be, from my personal experience and from talking to many sustainable entrepreneurs, my hunch would be, although women are still in the minority, overall the percentage of female entrepreneurs in sustainable entrepreneurship is larger than the average. That would be my hypothesis or my assumption, also against the background of our case examples and our case studies. But as Julia pointed out before, we don't have representative data.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Are there other questions from people in the virtual room? And if not, I will very happily ask another one. So, Frank, Julia, in the context of the overall project, we obviously set out with some pretty bold ambitions in terms of scientific and societal impact. And in the scientific dimension, one of the ambitions was to establish this field of user-driven innovation and entrepreneurship for sustainability as a legitimate discipline, field of study that would not only encourage today's more senior scholars in entrepreneurship and innovation to start investigating more deeply, but also as a potential career development trajectory for young scholars in the years to follow. As we towards the end of the project, how well do you feel that we've achieved that? Or how much progress do you feel that we've been making, particularly in the studies in Work Package 4, to identify this emerging phenomenon and to get traction with wider scientific community?
As you said, it was and it is quite an ambitious goal, but I'm still quite optimistic, and it remains to be seen. We have a few early cues, and that's why I'm fairly optimistic. We all together, with all researchers of Work Package 4, we filled the publication pipeline. So we have a number of manuscripts submitted to top journals like, for example, the Journal of Business Mentoring. And in addition to that, we had free, high-quality summer academies with all the young scholars who got great in-depth feedback, and I'm positive that some of these scholars will pursue a scientific career and start building on that. So it remains to be seen in the next couple of months and years, but I'm still fairly optimistic.
And maybe it's also worth pointing out, we had at the Academy of Management in Vancouver, which is the largest conference in the management science, we had our professional development workshop, which was specifically focused on this topic. We specifically pointed out our research in EU-InnovatE, and we had a great response. We started building a community that is in a mailing list, basically people who are interested in this topic. And as I said, we had a very, very great response. We had standing room. We had many people that were very interested. So I think that this research struck a nerve somehow. And for that, I would also agree that I think we're on a very positive way with that regard.
Oh, very good.
And our overall strategy is to establish the field of sustainable entrepreneurship as part of the mainstream entrepreneurship literature. As I said, I'm quite positive, and we have a couple of manuscripts submitted to entrepreneurship journals in this field. So let's see and hope for the best.
Very good. Now, does anybody else like to pick up on that or to ask any further questions? No? Do we have one more? I think I'm just looking to my colleague Marco, who appears to have somebody on the screen, but no. Okay, so it appears that people are happy with their comments and what they've heard so far. So with that, I would suggest that we just sort of move to a wrap-up of today's webinar. The quick summary of where we are in the project is that basically we will finish everything by the end of this year. So many of the deliverables are already complete. Some of them are available on the website, innovate.com. And we will also have a number of materials that we have streamed on there in the weeks and months to come, including videos, short case summaries, research reports, and the like. And I think the other main event that we want to highlight is November 22nd, which is the final societal conference, which will take place in Brussels at a hub for social enterprises and innovation, where we'll be focusing very much on pathways to accelerate sustainability entrepreneurship, including plenty of sustainable entrepreneurs into it from more local areas around Brussels and the Benelux region, hopefully a little further afield as well. And of course, perhaps the most important thing to underline is that there are no conference fees involved. So watch the newsletters, watch the website, and other streams for more details of this to come in the next 2 to 3 weeks. And as we say, please do feel free to visit the redesigned and revamped website, which is now, I think, already online, and you can use that to source basically anything you want to know about the project, and even to get in touch with different members of the consortium, Frank and his team in Munich, and other partners. So on that note, I would like to say thank you, first of all, to Frank and for Julia for your time in preparing your presentation to share with us today. My apologies once again for the little Cisco hiccup, but we're so grateful that their customer service managed to get the technical issue fixed in time for us to hold the webinar. And so finally, thank you very much to you all for joining us. And please don't hesitate to get in touch with any follow-up questions. And by extension, these slides will also be made available on the website in the days to come, along with those of the other webinars, so you can access these at any time for more information or for reference purposes. So thank you all once again. I wish you a very positive remainder of the week, and we look forward to being in touch again soon.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye for now.